Yeah. Welcome, Shri Rajiv Kumar, Chairman UP Real Estate Registration Authority. Real Estate Authority has been something which is in the talk for all the states ever since its inception. And Rajiv Kumar ji, a decorated IAS officer of the 1981 UP cadre, somebody who also held the post as Secretary Shipping Government of India, who knows bureaucracy, who knows the way the country functions, who knows the intricacies and the nitty-gritties of most of the social sectors of this country, especially in a state like UP, which is no less than a country on its own, representing almost 1/6 of the total population of the country, and also area-wise being one of the largest states of the nation. He's been given the charge as the first chairman of the Uttar Pradesh Authority for Real Estate. A very unenviable task in the beginning. I'm sure the troubled waters have settled now. And Mr. Rajiv Kumar, in the last month of his current assignment with RERA of the state, should be able to take us through a complete chronology of sequence of events from the inception of RERA to the kind of ethos behind the inception of RERA, the promulgation of RERA, the challenges state-wise, especially in his state, the implications of RERA coming into effect in various states, and then going forward, what benefits it encompasses for the common man, for the citizens. Let's aside the the builders, the people from the real estate industry, and what are the challenges in the next few years, not only from a UP's perspective, but also nationally, because there are a lot of states which have been a little late, rather which had to be forced into RERA, despite against the wishes of the local dispensation, regional dispensation, bringing the judiciary into effect. The judiciary had to enforce, like in the states of West Bengal. All this and more, I hand this over. Former Chief Secretary of Uttar Pradesh, Secretary Shipping Government of India, 1981 batch, UP cadre, decorated IAS officer, son of the soil, Shri Rajiv Kumar.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Goenka, for this introduction. I'm very grateful. I think for ease of presentation, I would like to divide this into primarily 3 parts. The first, as you mentioned, about the background. What is the importance of this sector? What were the requirements of having RERA? And what are the main components? How does RERA operate? How does it help the sector? And finally, a little bit about UP RERA, where I have spent 5 years. So to begin with, I think we have to remember that real estate sector is very in this country. Not only from an economic perspective, it provides employment to, this is the second largest employment generation in the country. We have at the moment almost 7% of the GDP coming from real estate and construction. And we expect that by 2030, $1 trillion worth of GDP's contribution will be coming from this sector. In addition, there are more than 250 industries, paint, electrical, pipes, cement, which are all benefited indirectly when this sector grows. So there is a multiplier effect if real estate grows. And I think in the next couple of years, we expect that the GDP's contribution for real estate sector from the present 7% should go up to about 13%. This is achievable for a very simple reason, that India is amongst those very few large countries left where substantial urbanization is still to take place. And there is a huge demand. And as my professor in Harvard told us on day one of our infrastructure class, you show me the demand, I'll give you a good project. So in this sector, for the next foreseeable decades, demand is not going to be an issue. We have only to look forward. And a good thing is, which I would like to mention in the beginning, that the sector is now, after a couple of years, finally looking up. So there are a lot of positive impulses, and I'm sure that going forward, this sector will do well. Now, cutting back to the past, the talk of regulating the real estate sector has been there for a very long time. And not going too far back, the first draft of some kind of a regulation for this sector was done in 2008. There used to be a department which was called Housing and Urban Poverty Alleviation, which was subsequently merged with the present Department of Urban Development and Housing. But there were major problems with the buyers, especially in NCR, Mumbai metropolitan area, where the buyers were really looking for a quick solution to their problems. And there were fairly strong impulses on both sides. But it was by the government in 2016 that RERA Act finally was put up in Parliament and approved. And the first portion or the operational part of the Act was notified with effect from 1st May 2016. Now, I would like to take you back to 2016. Two very critical pieces of legislation were done, which were pending for a very long time. One was RERA, the other was the Indian Bankruptcy Code. And they have, as we have seen in the last couple of years of operation, been quite successful in resolving issues, the object of which they were set up. Now, if we look at the economic aspect of why we needed RERA, there is a component which all of those who have studied economics know. There is something called information asymmetry, which means a builder has much more information about the project than anybody who's planning to buy or take a stake in that project. And RERA, one of the major objectives and achievements have been that to a substantial effect, this information asymmetry has been, this bridge has been bridged and this gap has been closed. So information asymmetry was one reason. There were other issues like malpractices which were prevalent in this sector. You read about them and you have been reading about them. In addition, once a person had got into a contractual agreement with a builder, which we call it the buyer-builder agreement or an agreement for sale or whatever name, then the clauses of that agreement used to be very one-sided. And once a person has paid up his initial money, he's almost stuck with that project, irrespective of what happens. And the exit was not easy. Even if it's delayed, even if there are other problems. The remedy at that time, some states did have a rudimentary kind of a provision where apartment acts were there. In Maharashtra, MOPA was there, and so on and so forth. Or primarily there was the Consumer Protection Act. However, the Consumer Protection Act applied to the person who has gone to that court. It was a process which took time. And the curative part was essentially that they would get their money back. The other aspect which relate to the development and regulation of the sector were not covered. So with all this happening, there was a crying need of having a sectoral regulator. And I must say that to the compliments of Government of India. They were able to do a fairly difficult regulation in the sense that if you look at the constitutional provisions, the land and urban local bodies are primarily with the state. And this was an act which was done centrally to be implemented in each state. So I would say that it is quite almost a miracle in the legislative provisions history that we have an act which applies to the whole country uniformly, and the rules provide some flexibility locally. So we finally in 2016 had that. It gave a year for the authorities, etc., to be set up. And in 2017, all the provisions of RERA were notified, and this act came into being. Now, coming to the aspect as to how RERA helps buyers and the other stakeholders, I would like to say that the Act provides for a real estate regulatory authority, which in UP I chair. There is an appellate authority. If our orders are challenged by somebody, they go to an appellate authority, and the second appeal lies with the High Court. Now, that is the broad picture. But the most important aspect, or three in this act. Number one, it provides that before a person can launch a project, he has to get it registered with RERA. And if he does not register with RERA and sells it within the planning area, then there is a fine which can go up to 10% of the project cost. This penalty can be imposed. And there is also a provision of a 3-year jail term if you violate Section 3, which provides for registration of a project. The moment he registers the project, he has to tell where is the land. The layout has to be approved before he gets it registered. And he has to give all the information required for completing the project. So whatever information.
So does it apply retrospectively?
That's a very good question. I thought I would take it up a little later, but I'll explain here. I'll just complete this part, the 3 legs, and I'll come to this question you have raised. The first part is information. So the project details, the layout, whether there is any case pertaining to the land or the project, how much area is to be given for various purposes, that is all available on the website. There is a plan for completion of the project, and based on that plan, every quarter, a quarterly progress report is thereafter filed, and also an annual report of accounts is to be filed. So for any buyer, there is plenty of information. And in UP, we are also in the process of finalizing a gradation framework where the project and the promoter would be graded to facilitate the buyers. The second aspect is that whatever money comes to the project, whether through the buyers or through financial institutions, 70% of that has to go to an escrow account, which can only be used for construction of the project or for buying land or repaying for the land. So there is a escrow mechanism which ensures that the project does get completed. The approvals are all in place at the time of registration. And we have felt that generally 50 to 60% of the amount received is enough for completion of the project. So the second safeguard is that there is a escrow account. And the third important aspect is that if there is a dispute, project is getting delayed, somebody wants to exit out of a delayed project, if there is a change of layout without 2/3 of the allottees approving it, if there are any structural defects, for that they can come to RERA and raise their grievance. Now, coming to your point, as it happens with all the acts, you are aware that it takes a couple of years before the judicial pronouncement on the constitutionality, legal validity, and the various provisions are made. So when RERA was promulgated, there was a huge reaction and resistance to it initially, primarily because people did not understand that it is in the favor of all the stakeholders, not only buyers, even builders, even agents. But because there was some misconception, a lot of writs were filed across the country challenging the provisions of RERA. This went to Honorable Supreme Court. They said that all these writs be clubbed and Bombay High Court would decide upon this aspect. So there is a landmark judgment by Bombay High Court in Neel Kamal Realtors case, where the constitutional validity of this act was carried out. Subsequently, this specific issue of retrospective effect was also challenged in some of the judgments which UP RERA had passed in the Newtech judgment case. Finally, the Supreme Court has held that for all those projects which were completed on the appointed date, which is 1st of May 2017, there is a completion. Those projects will not fall within the purview of RERA. But any project which was not complete on 1st of May 2017, that ought to be considered as an ongoing project and would have to be registered. Initially, the period was 3 months, within 3 months of the act coming into operation. So therefore, there is a retrospectivity to the extent that if there is an allotment made in 2009-10, but in 2017, the project is not yet completed, it has to be registered with RERA and the provisions of RERA will apply. So I hope this clarifies the point which you were raising.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, any which ways the projects which are completed before the effectiveness or the effectuality of the act, there is no point applying that act to that project.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But in case, apart from registration, I mean, ongoing projects, projects completed before the, enactment and the applicability of the act in that particular state, because a lot of states started, applying that act, even after 2007, like in Bengal, it got started from probably 2021, if I correctly remember. Now, in that case, the projects which are completed and there are issues wherein consumers are affected, will RERA applicable, which is applicable in that state and that particular point in time, will not help the particular buyer in that case also, because it's not a project registered under RERA anyways?
The broad argument which was given and the basic essence of what the Honorable Supreme Court has said, that we divide all projects between completed and ongoing. Ongoing, there is no issue that it should be covered by RERA. Now, there are some provisions of RERA, for example, for structural defects. There is a section which provides that the defect liability will be 5 years from the date an OC is received. So if there is a project which was completed, but those 5 years would have fallen within the period after 17, my understanding is that those matters could have been covered. However, the important point to note here is that for pre-RERA completed projects, if there are any grievances, the Honorable Supreme Court again has held that the buyers have an option to go to the consumer forum or to the under the IBC with the NCLT. So all the 3 forums today are available for a buyer, depending on what they think is in their own interest.
I mean, it could be the IBC, it could be the consumer forum, or it could be the RERA.
As of today, for registered projects. For unregistered projects, the other two acts are available, irrespective of whether they are registered, they are completed. So that distinction has been deliberately maintained. And the reason was that this act is primarily forward-looking. You get a layout, you get land, you get it registered, give all the details. Whatever money you take, put 70% in an escrow account and use that money to complete the project in a timely fashion. So my personal belief is that the kind of problems which we were having earlier, prior to RERA coming into force, you would find that substantially reduced in future projects. So another thing I would want to point out that as per the provisions of the Act, it is applicable to a plot area of 500 square meters and 8 apartments. So anything which is 8 apartments, 500 square meters necessarily needs to be registered within a planning area. Now, the state governments have been given flexibility to reduce this number. As you recently would have read, you mentioned about West Bengal. They have reduced it to 200 square meters and 6 apartments. So some of the states are saying that because of the densities, plot sizes are smaller. Let us look at that from RERA's perspective. Now, for areas which are outside the planning area, and when I say planning area, it could be Delhi Development Authority, it could be GDA, it could be Noida, it could be in Maharashtra, their development authorities or the planning authorities. Those projects are necessarily covered in RERA. For projects outside the planning area, in public interest, RERA can direct them to be registered. So there are, because now all the things are coming together, the banks would not finance a project which is not RERA registered in most of the states, thanks to the directions of RBI. And we have also been interacting closely with the banks because there are two very important issues in RERA where bankers have a very crucial role. One is they give loans to the finance for the project as well as to the buyers. So they need a degree of comfort that they are also using the details available with RERA. The second aspect is that out of this 70% escrowed account, if any money is to be drawn by the builder, he has to provide 3 certificates to the banker. A certificate by a chartered accountant, a chartered engineer, and a chartered architect, stating that the money which they have drawn earlier has been fully utilized. So therefore, the bankers also have a role in ensuring that these certificates are with them when they withdraw, let them withdraw the money from the escrowed account, which ensures their money safety, that ensures buyer's money safety and timely completion of the project. So this is the broad architecture. I would not like to get into other aspects. One more point I would like to cover, that there is a provision under RERA, which UP RERA we are very liberally utilizing, that if an order of RERA is not complied, we can impose penalty up to 5% of the project cost for that non-compliance of the. So that's a big deterrent, and we have been using it, as I mentioned. As a result, we have, for all the execution requests we have received, almost 75% compliance has already been done, and this number is progressively going up. Now, I would like to briefly mention about our journey in UP RERA. I'm extremely grateful for the state government because we took oath on 9th of August in 2018. I had an excellent team of members with me, 3 of them. And the state government had already identified our office spaces in Lucknow. They had also identified a piece of land where our regular office would get constructed, and they had given all support from staff and resources perspective so that we could do our work. When immediately after joining, we realized that there is a huge number of complaints from NCR region. The state government immediately notified that we must have a regional office in Greater Noida. And that office space was also identified and placed with us. We also thought that under Section 32, there is a provision that conciliation should be encouraged. Again, the state government notified that the conciliation should be permitted in UP RERA. So at all steps, they have been extremely helpful. Now, why I am giving this background is that in August, we took oath. 3rd of September, we had already started the regular hearings. And there is, I would say, very few examples of this speed for new offices or setups to start functioning. A little bit of statistics, I think, will help in explaining what kind of challenges we had. The whole country has about 1,40,000 complaints filed, of which 50,000 have been in UP alone. So we have been taking the burden of almost 40% of the country's complaints, 38% to be precise. And the disposal, as per Government of India's Urban Development Ministry's website, we have disposed of 41% of the whole country's disposed complaints. Now, it was a huge challenge, and we took 2 decisions early on. One was that we should use technology. And UP was the first state where online complaint filing system was introduced. We also decided that it will not be feasible to handle so many complaints unless we individually dispose them off. So all the chairperson and 3 members functioned as different benches. And this was challenged subsequently in the Honorable Supreme Court to take judgment, which upheld that there is a provision of delegation. And this decision was in order. So this subsequently again, before COVID struck, in February 2020, we moved on to e-courts because we found that people have to come from different places. UP is a very large state. So if somebody has to come, say, for example, Jhansi or Gorakhpur or Saharanpur to attend physical hearings, it was a long way off. And at that time, we didn't realize, but soon after, as you would recall, March 20, COVID struck. And I'm happy to report that almost 26,000 complaints were filed when we were hearing online, of which 20,000 have been disposed. So I must thank all the buyers, the builders, their representatives to assist us so that we are able to continue this. I would narrate 2 points here. Almost every week, we have some people attending this, not only from different corners of the country, but also abroad. So people would request that, can I take my case early because it is 2 a.m. here, or calling from USA or from New Zealand. So we facilitate this process, and you imagine what kind of savings in terms of time and resources for the complainants are there because of this process. During COVID, I mentioned to a person that he should file his papers within 1 week. He said, please give me 3 weeks. I'm talking from the COVID ward. So that kind of a participation was there. And I'm happy to report that this is an excellent system. We also started a system called RERA-Chairman because people were not able to move out of their homes during COVID. They could get a complaint filed for or log in to our system, request for meeting an officer. We facilitated it online. And we've had more than 100 such online interactions till now. It's so successful that we are continuing with it even after COVID. Most of our functioning is online. We are now going on to our version 2, which will make it completely paperless. We are also planning to introduce some components of artificial intelligence in our e-code system to make it more user-friendly, to make it quicker. And I think with everybody's support, I can say with great satisfaction that we have been able to meet up the objectives in UP RERA with which this was set up. And as I mentioned in the beginning, luckily this sector is moving up. We do have some issues in Noida and Greater Noida, especially about stalled projects. Almost 1.5 lakh units are stuck there. We are in constant interaction with the state government. And we have also made a set of recommendations to resolve those issues. I'm very confident that in the next 2-3 months, we find a solution to most of the problems bedeviling NCR for the last 10 years. So thank you very much for giving me an opportunity. If there are any other issues, I'll be very happy to be with you.
Could you throw some light on the GST aspects?
The
Completed
GST
projects, or the flat, there was once upon a time I had a call with you on that particular issue of the GST rates being varying from, transfer in case of a completed flat to, or probably a partially completed flat. Could you throw some light on those aspects, incompleted projects? You had, answered that there is a logical reason behind those GST differences. Could you please throw some light on that?
So, see, the broad point is that the central government has been encouraging affordable housing from the very beginning. And I do recall that there was a point of time when we were trying from shipping ministry to get infrastructure status for some of our ports and our shipyards. At the same time, UPA was also trying for getting affordable housing, the infrastructure status. And you are aware that the central government did provide infrastructure status for affordable housing. They have been very supportive, RBI especially on the rates. We have had a blip post-COVID, but otherwise the kind of interest rates which were there, they were falling. Similarly on GST also, the issue is that those projects which are say 10-year-old, there they were in a VAT kind of a regime with service tax and so on. Then GST came, so they moved to the GST. And subsequently, the central government did notify for completed project, nil GST. For some, it was still 12%. And if they did not take advantage, the rate was lower, offsetting off. So there were, of course, different regimes, but if you want to complete a project, it was a kind of an incentive for a buyer also, that the GST rate being lower, their liability is reduced. And that would spur a lot of people to complete their project and sell them off. So I think broadly the GST regime is now stabilized. And when you had asked this question, we were in early days, those changes. Presently, things are much more stable. And in a lot of parts of the country, this sector is growing. we are all very optimistic, and all the regime, whether taxation, whether interest rates, and otherwise, they are very positive and helpful.
When RERA was introduced, you had a lot of these ongoing projects which suddenly got a bolt from the blue, especially for uh, builders who were, small to middle class builders. Uh, Now medium class builders, or probably builders who were not as big as those names that we are well aware of. Now suddenly, with the introduction of RERA in those projects, those builders could have really found it very difficult, or could have found themselves completely strangled for breathing space. And thereby those projects must have got affected, which I keep hearing from individual promoters and builders. Suddenly, uh, two floor plan, usse upar nahi ho, nothing more than that was being passed. And our entire project failed because of sudden introduction, because we had to get registered with RERA and to follow and comply with their provisions, which for the last 30 years we were not. So suddenly, so application of RERA for ongoing projects affected these builders and also the buyers, because they paid advances for their projects. So don't you think it was a catch-22 situation to introduce it for ongoing projects?
I think if you look at not only in real estate sector, but if you look at any place which for decades were doing whatever they wanted, and you put them under any kind of regulation, there would surely be trepidations, there would be anxiety, there would be concern. But if you look now and ask the same people, they would find the RERA provisions and the application of RERA to have been as helpful to promoters as to the buyers. And I do recall that there was some discussion earlier in my career about officers. So one of the very senior officers who later on became the cabinet secretary answered to the press, officers are only of two kinds. They are either good or bad. So from that perspective, the builders also are of two categories. Either there are good builders who adhere to good practices, or there are builders who have diverted money, who have used money of one project to buy land somewhere else or to do something else. We read these stories every day. So obviously the second category of builders would have certainly found some kind of a check on their activities. But that's a matter of past. Today, anybody who's doing building he knows that this is the framework in which he has to work. There is an agreement which has been approved by the state government, which is a more balanced agreement that has to be signed. And we have, even in UP RERA, we have taken up a lot of projects for rehabilitation under using Section 8. It has been a pioneering work by UP RERA, or using Section 15, where there is a transfer of promoter. Almost 20 projects are progressing. Some of them have got, I'm happy to say, the OC also. And the promoters have come forward themselves to take up the advantage of these provisions. But the initial fear, the initial concern, I think that has all evaporated quite some time back. And I'm sure that the promoters which had all these concerns would be worried, because a lot of practices which were going on in the present dispensation would not be possible.
But, that's from the promoter's perspective, as you rightly started the conversation, stating the rule of economics about, asymmetric information. Now, the buyers have always been, on the other side of the fence when it comes to these kind of legal, kind of fine tuning, which probably the promoters could be, held liable for. Why, it's like, wheat with the chaff. I mean, everybody gets affected. So how do you think the buyers have really held guard, or how has the government or probably your kind of institution been able to safeguard or bail those buyers out of this kind of sudden, change in guard?
So I think let us look at it from two perspectives. One is projects post-RERA. I have mentioned already about the safeguards like escrow account, etc. All the state governments have notified model agreements which are to be registered. Now, these agreements are not one-sided as they used to be earlier, and the rights and duties of the builder and the buyer, based on the provisions of RERA, have been really clearly laid down. And although this matter is again being considered in the Honorable Supreme Court, but today the agreement for sale or an allotee agreement in every state is much more balanced provisions compared to earlier. Now, as I mentioned to you, we've had almost 50,000 people coming to us with their complaints. And I am happy to say that about 15,000 of them had filed for execution of their orders, of which 75% have been complied with because we hold regular hearings under section 63 read with 38 and 40, basically to ensure that the orders are complied with. But apart from what directly RERA has done, there is one more aspect I would like to bring. That is that today the equation between the builder and the buyer have changed. I wouldn't say they are completely level yet, but there is a comparatively more level playing field. And in a lot of cases, the buyers, if they say that, look, if you don't hear what we are saying, we have an option to go to RERA. And that is something which has created an environment where everybody knows the ground rules. The builder also knows that if this happens, these are the outcomes possible for it. And therefore, not many matters do get settled today without people having to come to RERA. Secondly, if there is a project which we are pursuing with the builder for getting it completed, it's not only the complainant which is getting benefit. Everybody who is in that tower will also get their OC and their house. So there are a lot of indirect benefits of the Act apart from what directly UP RERA and other colleagues in other states. Maharashtra has been one of the pioneers. Gurgaon they also had a deluge of applications. Gujarat has done a good job. So there are a lot of state cadres, state RERAs who have really done wonderful works. And those which come up later, I must say, for example, Himachal, a lot of them are now catching up and coming up with better practices than with what we started.
Does RERA also bring into its ambit the liability of the contractors?
No, there are only 3 players today. Though there is a constant demand by various people that those who have the right to pass the map or give an OC, some of that component should also be brought under RERA. However, as of now, there are only 3 stakeholders: the buyer, the builder, and the agent. And the power to issue directions are there. However, I must add that the Honorable Supreme Court, for example, in a matter where an individual buyer had taken bank loan and the same unit was taken up by the bank under the SARFAESI Act, the Supreme Court has held that RERA's provision will apply and the buyer's right are higher than that of a financial institution. So there are various other pronouncements which are now indirectly helping the buyers to get their houses.
Is RERA subject to RTI?
RERA is, of course, subject to RTI.
when you compare the states like West Bengal, which is probably the last one to join the bandwagon, I mean, what do you have to say to that? And what is your assessment of the current status?
I think we have a forum called All India Forum for Real Estate Chairpersons, called I for RERA. I had the privilege of being the first chairperson when it was set up. And when we had the first RERA conclave in 2019 in Lucknow, we kicked off the first meeting of this forum. So we have seen over a period of time that new RERAs are coming up, and most of them are trying to catch up with the ever-increasing pace. Now, you are aware about the historical background of the West Bengal's case. They had a provision called HERA within the state, and the state government's view was that it is enough. We don't need a RERA separately. Matter went to Honorable Supreme Court. They had a couple of months ago ruled that RERA would be applicable in West Bengal. Now, the state government, I am told that they have started the process of setting up the authority. It was, different states have taken a different routes. Setting up of a new authority depends on so many factors. I'm sure that in due course, the pressure from below, which is the buyers, and we have some very good activists in Calcutta, they will also ensure that irrespective of the background, RERA in West Bengal should also start functioning.
Land reform is constitutionally a state subject. How does RERA, keep pace with kind of political feud between the ruling dispensations at the center and the states in this kind of a federal structure?
I think the question you have raised, Mr. Goenka, is a fairly complicated one. But as far as RERA is concerned, because a person has to own the land before he comes for registration. Therefore, issues are less complicated. But I see the point which you are making from two perspectives. One, in India, almost 60% of all dispute indirectly or directly relates to property. And even in Honorable Supreme Court, 20 to 30% complaints or cases do pertain with property. So property rights is a big issue in our country. However, as I mentioned that for RERA, the person has to show there is a land, it is in his name, or he has an agreement which is watertight before a project gets registered. So therefore, the issue gets limited. But land is a highly sensitive issue, especially in rural areas. But because planning areas are primarily urbanized, therefore those issues are little less. I think your mic is muted.
Rajiv ji, I mean, this is a very complicated subject, this RERA. And all the states have their own challenges, their own kind of dynamics and socio-economic dynamics, which have been there for ages. So it's a very difficult task for the RERA team in that state to, it's like, trying to, it's like a, basically an ambassador to Pakistan role. So,
I think just to kind of complete this part, frankly, my personal experience with having almost 4 years with I for RERA also, and having seen the reactions, the feedback from all my other colleagues in other states, I think one prerequisite for success of RERA is how much political commitment is there as far as RERA is concerned. So, and why I'm saying it is that, look, once you pass an order of refund, it is the district magistrates who have to recover the money. If you take any other aspects, once people are aware that the state government is fully committed to the idea of RERA, it really makes life easy. And I think what also relates to the question which you had earlier raised with reference to a state.
So we are in times when, political dispensations, Rajiv ji, sir, you've been very kind, courteous, and very detailed in terms of your description of the intricacies or the broad contours of RERA, which are probably permitted in the kind of project and timelines that we have here. But the political dispensations will be keeping themselves in good stead if they can keep in mind today's times, roti kapra makan and free internet. These are the few things, which are going to drive the the mandate in their favor. The roti kapra is taken care probably by the freebies that are doled out, especially during the election times. The internet is taken care of by Geo. At least they have to take care of the Makan thing as well. If they don't do that, consumers are not fools. People are not fools. Today, house, a roof on the head is something wherein the common man is desirous of the state governments in every state to probably safeguard their interests like never before. RERA is just an opportunity for the states, to play in an aligned manner with the neat and clean and corruption-less objective of the Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Damodar Das Modi. Thank you so much. Jai Hind.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and thanks for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.